Dear colleague, this is video conference team. Please stand by. Our room is busy now. We will connect once it's possible.
Just saying hello to the person in the booth, waving. And I'm just checking to see if Ali Al-Dubaisi is online and if Dana Ahmed are online, who will be two of our speakers. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So good morning to everyone. Very good to see so many faces here, to see so many states. Thank you very much for coming. There's a lot going on, and it's very warm and uncomfortable to be in these rooms sometimes. So we very much appreciate you being here. We have two speakers who are online, and we have three speakers. A third one will be joining us very soon. And we're going to have quite a structured event, and I'll be asking questions, and there'll be a few minutes to answer the time. I'd like to introduce everybody. My name is Michael Kambata. I'm the Geneva representative for the Gulf Center for Human Rights. To my right, we have Fala, who works for the MENA Rights Group. To my left, we have Miriam working for Reprieve. We have Dana online from Amnesty International, and we have Ali Dubaisi from the European Saudi Organization for Human Rights. What we are trying to just one bit of housekeeping. Please no photographs. All the photographs, there's only one photographer permitted, who is our colleague over there, and she will only be photographing the members on the podium. Okay, great. So what we're trying to do is, in light of the report by the Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Execution, who actually came out with a report saying that the death penalty is inherently an act of torture from the time of arrest all the way to the time of penalty and beyond. And this is, of course, of particular concern in Saudi Arabia, which is the country that we're going to be addressing today. If we're going to be looking at this from a number of different lenses, the fact that torture is used to obtain confessions, for example, the fact that the executions are arbitrary, violations of fair trial, discrimination, and just the lack of international standards. So what I'm going to be doing is asking a series of questions, and we're actually going to be starting with Ali Dubaisi, who will be the first speaker online. So I just wanted, so the European Saudi Organization for Human Rights has closely monitored executions in Saudi Arabia over many years. And I'm going to ask Ali if you can give us a brief picture of the current crisis, what's changed in 24 and 25, and what types of offenses are leading to executions. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Like to welcome by everybody here in this room. First of all, I would make that we are not speaking about isolated digital mistakes or administrative failure. We are speaking about a political decision coming from the highest level of power in a system where independent institutions don't really exist. The prosecution and the court don't function as safeguards between the individual and the state. In many death penalty cases, they operate as a tool inside a closed political and security structure. Since Mohammed bin Salman became the central decision maker in Saudi Arabia, approximately in 2017 till today, the use of death penalty has become broader, bolder, and more brutal. In 2024, Saudi Arabia reached a record number of executions. In 2025, again, the record was broken. This is not simply law enforcement. It is a political approach that uses killing as a tool of rule, deterrence, and intimidation. What is especially dangerous is that many executions are not for intentional killing. They are carried out for offenses that don't meet the international threshold of the most serious crimes: drug-related offenses, political cases, protest-related cases, so-called terrorism or national security cases, and in some cases, acts allegedly committed when the person was a child. This is why we should not fall into the trap of Saudi Arabia language. When the government says there is a court, a prosecutor, an appeal, and Supreme Court, this doesn't mean there is justice. In recent years, the judiciary has been further subordinated through appointments, replacement, intimidation, and reported reprisal against some former judges. This doesn't mean the previous judge was independent or fair, but it shows that the authorities wanted an even more obedient judiciary, on less likely to hesitate when implemented the political agenda. In many death penalties cases, we see the same path: arbitrary arrest, incommunicado, detention, torture, or threats, accuracy, conviction, and unfair trial. Secrecy around the execution and the denial of family right to say goodbye or even to know the moral place. So, what changed in 2024 and 2025 is not only the number, it is the political shamelessness with which Saudi Arabia is now using execution. The death penalty in Saudi Arabia is not merely a criminal punishment. It is a political tool in the hands of the authoritarian power used against the vulnerable foreign national, Sunni and Shia, protester, and anyone the authorities want to turn into a message of fear.
Thank you very much, Ali, for giving us that for setting the scene. I'm now going to ask Fala to add some elements to that, also setting the scene. Essentially, Saudi Arabia argues that the death penalty is applied only for the most serious crimes in accordance with domestic law. And so I'm going to ask you if you can give us, from a legal perspective, what the Saudi framework actually allows. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for everyone, and thank you to Ali for your intervention. So yes, Saudi Arabia consistently presents the death penalty as a lawful punishment, which is reserved to the most serious crimes. However, our documentation over the past few years shows that the domestic legal framework permits capital punishment far beyond the narrow limits of what is permitted under international law. At the international level, the right to life is protected under Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this provision does not amount to an absolute prohibition of the death penalty, but it's widely understood that where it is retained, it should be retained only for the most serious crimes. And this standard is further reflected in Article 6 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Saudi Arabia is not a party to the ICCPR, but it has repeatedly indicated its intention to abide by the principle of the most serious crimes under international law, including in its engagement with UN mechanisms. And the Human Rights Committee has actually made it clear that the notion of the most serious crimes must be interpreted restrictively and should be applied only to crimes of extreme gravity, which involve intentional killing. And offenses that basically do not result in death can or should actually never justify the imposition of the death penalty. However, in practice, Saudi Arabia's legal framework departs significantly from this standard, as actually Ali has mentioned a bit. And a central concern is actually the extensive use of discretionary or ta'zir offenses, which are basically offenses that are often broadly defined and allow judges a significant latitude or margin of appreciation in determining what punishment should be imposed. In practice, this has enabled the imposition of death sentences for conduct that actually does not involve intentional killing and therefore does not meet the most serious crime standard. And recent years have, demonstrated this very clearly. Saudi authorities have continued to impose and carry out the death sentences for drug-related offenses, but also for conducts that relate to terrorism and national security. which, fall outside of the restrictive interpretation of the most serious crime standard that is put forward by the Human Rights Committee. I'll stop there due to time.
Great. Thank you very much, Fala. We're keeping to time so far, but it's early days yet. We're going to move to a second round of questions now to really talk about torture during interrogation, the mechanics of arrest, and then also some of the issues about due process. So first, I'm going to ask a representative from Miriam from Reprieve. Reprieve have documented patterns of arbitrary arrest, incommunicado detention, solitary confinement, and torture. And I'm just wondering if you can outline how these abuses typically appear from the moment of arrest through to interrogation and trial.
Thank you, Michael. Reprieve has documented death penalty cases in Saudi Arabia for over a decade. And we found a consistent pattern of due process violations, unfair trials, and convictions based on torture-tainted confessions. These violations begin from the moment of arrest. Individuals are often detained without an arrest warrant or any explanation, in contravention of the Arab Charter on Human Rights, to which Saudi Arabia is actually party. Some reported being subjected to violence from the moment of arrest. One Egyptian client who was executed last year for drug offenses, Gamal Salema, was shot by Saudi authorities during arrest, and the bullet remained lodged in his neck until his execution. Following detention, many individuals also reported they were subjected to enforced disappearance or basically effectively kidnapped through prolonged periods of solitary confinement without access to families or lawyers. Two Egyptian nationals we represent, Mohammed Saad and Omar Sharif, I'm so sorry, were denied contact with lawyers and their families for almost 2 years before they were brought before a judge. And during this period of prolonged solitary confinement, individuals are often interrogated and subjected to torture and various forms of ill treatment to extract confessions. For instance, Hassam al-Shazli reported being physically assaulted, denied food, chained, and repeatedly promised release if he confessed to the allegations against him. These confessions then become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, and the court often relies on no other evidence aside from the torture-coerced confession, which is, needless to say, incompatible with Saudi Arabia's international obligations under the Convention Against Torture. Access to effective legal representation is also routinely denied. Lawyers are sometimes appointed, but they are state-affiliated and often fear reprisals, so they aren't unable to provide genuinely independent and effective representation. So as a result, the detainees don't have a meaningful opportunity to actually build a legal case and challenge the allegations against them. Foreign nationals are also Foreign nationals are particularly vulnerable. We've had Ethiopian clients in Saudi Arabia on death row for drug offenses who were executed last year, who basically told us that they weren't present for any court hearings and that they were made to sign documents in Arabic, a language they don't understand. These violations don't end once the death sentence is imposed. If anything, the psychological suffering begins on death row itself. Needless to say, there is extremely harsh detention conditions that fall short of the Nelson Mandela rules. Many on death row experience psychological suffering and the death row phenomenon because they live for years in uncertainty and don't receive a notification of their execution until the very last moment. In the case of Reprieve client Hassam al-Shazli, these conditions reportedly led to suicidal ideation. Last year, Egyptian nationals reported being moved in what they described as an execution chamber, and they were told that they're about to be executed. Otherwise, they were forced to just watch their fellow inmates be taken for execution on a daily basis. And despite the extensive evidence documented by victims, their families, and organizations, such as those present here, Saudi authorities continue to deny the prevalence of torture and unfair trial practices in the kingdom. Finally, it's important to stress that given the ongoing regional stability and conflict in the Middle East, there's a real risk that these human rights violations are being obscured from international scrutiny, which makes international and sustained attention, accountability, and engagement on these issues more important than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Yahya from Al-Qust, who is able to join us. They have Al-Qust documents the processes of grossly unfair trials, actually. And so I'd like to ask you to give us some insight into the due process and fair trial abuses that lead to executions, and how you would rate the independence of the judiciary. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, the panelists and the audience here. Actually, the issue in Saudi Arabia is complicated and it's deep in the root. So it's about the system itself. So because the judiciarian system, it's not independent and it's completely rely on the who is in the power. So in the past, it was rely on the royal family. Right now, it's rely just on the Mohammed bin Salman and his father. They are controlling the country, so they are controlling the judiciarian system as well. And to go in deep and to see what's going on in the country, we can hear some promises of reform from time to time. And one of the biggest mistakes is to hear for or to believe these promises while the atmosphere and the environment is not allowing this reform to be implemented on the ground. When we are looking to the situation, we can see the issue not started from the death penalty, it started from before that. Torture, the situation in the prison, the investigation, and the arrest itself, and the environment before that. So when they arrest someone, we can't get the real information why he's arrested. And when he's in the prison, we can't understand the situation in the prison. And when we are talking about lawyers, we always, when we are working with Human Rights Council or special rapporteurs or whatever, they're asking about, or NGOs as well, our friends in the NGOs, they're asking about, is there a lawyer? Sometimes there's a lawyers, but the situation is more difficult than having a lawyer. Lawyers right now, all of them, all the independent lawyers have been targeted in the last few years. And all the lawyers right now, they are appointed by the court itself or by the authority, or they are completely coordinating with the authority and with the court. I'm not going to say all the lawyers are traitors, but this is the system. They can't breach it. And if we are dealing with lawyers inside the country, and when we are asking them to do something to act as a lawyer, they refuse, they can't. And some of them, at the middle of the case, they said, we will resign here and we will stop, we can't continue, because they need to follow what they are being told from the court. And moreover, about the independent in the judicial system, some of the judges, they sentence several people for death penalty. Right now, they are in prison, and they have been, they could face the death penalty as well. They are judges, and they were in the specialized criminal court, and they sentenced several people for the death penalty, and they could face it right now. They are in prisons right now. And that will show you how is the system is corrupt. So what we are trying to do right now, we are trying to push for real reform. The real reform, first of all, allowing people to monitor the cases, allow the NGOs to visit the prisoners, allow the solicitors and the lawyers to act properly, allowing the embassies to act on behalf of their people and to visit them and to look after them. Until we reach that, this is a very long process, but until we reach that, we need, first of all, to make sure that, as I said before, we don't believe everything that's said by the authority. Second thing, we need the embassies, if there is foreigners, they are facing the death penalty or in the prisons, we need the embassies for their countries to take the responsibility. Also, we need to pressure for actual visit from the NGOs for the people in the death penalty law or the people in the prison, to make sure they have the fair trial, they have lawyers. And without this pressure, we can't believe any reform that's coming from the authority, because, as I said before, the issue, it is not just with the death penalty itself, it's all the process, all the environment. So it's from A to Z corrupted. It's from A to Z controlled by the authority, by the head of the authority. in every cases, even in the drugs offenses, they said there is a war on drugs, but we can't trust the trial is transparent. We can't trust the trial is fair trial. We can't trust there is a lawyer. That means everything is corrupted and everything is need to re-pressure again and to look for that all again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yahya. And now I'll turn to Fala, who will talk about the UN mechanisms and how they respond to individual cases.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think it's important to bring out what the UN human rights mechanisms, have said about individual death penalty cases, because they've expressed, consistently serious concerns regarding torture, arbitrary detention, and unfair trial violations. And here I'd like to mention, or to mainly focus on the engagement of the working group on arbitrary detention, on that front. Because the working group has issued multiple opinions, finding that certain detentions on death row were arbitrary. And these opinions are very important because they identify systemic failures rather than just isolated procedural errors. For example, in the case of 5 individuals who were sentenced to death for acts allegedly committed when they were minors, the WIGAD found that their detention was arbitrary, including because it lacked a legal basis, it resulted from the exercise of freedom of expression, and violated their right for a fair trial. It also found that the proceedings were actually tainted by allegations of mistreatments and torture, and that the detention was discriminatory because the individuals belonged to the Shia minority. And the same pattern was actually found in another opinion by the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, which was also issued very recently regarding Mohammed Labad and Mohammed Al-Faraj, 2 Saudi Shia protesters who are currently on death row. Additionally, maybe adding to what Yahya was saying, the WIGAD has also addressed the use of the death penalty against foreign nationals for drug-related offenses. And in the case, and also another recent opinion that was issued by the working group, it's a case of 3 Egyptian nationals. The WIGAD reaffirmed that non-violent drug offenses do not meet the most serious crimes threshold. And they noted that they noted other violations, including incommunicado detention, lack of access to legal counsel, and torture to extract confessions. I'd invite you to check these opinions on the OHCHR website or on our website. We've published some PR around these, summarizing these cases. So taken together, these cases show that the issue is not limited to individual violations, but that there is a recurring pattern, which is vague laws, discriminatory targeting of Shia defendants and foreign nationals, denial of legal safeguards, torture-tainted confessions, unfair trial, and the imposition of death sentences in circumstances that violates international standards. So maybe just to finish very quickly, the challenge today is not a lack of UN engagement. The challenge right now is implementation. So Saudi Arabia has repeatedly failed to give effect to these WIGAD opinions, and this is why the follow-up is essential on that front.
Thank you very much, Fala. Now we're going to turn online to Dana Ahmed. She's from Amnesty International. They've just issued a recent report focusing on the sharp rise of executions for drug-related offenses, particularly affecting foreign nationals. And so I'm going to ask Dana to address the patterns along this.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for being here. One of the key findings of our work on the execution crisis in Saudi Arabia since last year is that foreign nationals are bearing the brunt of the escalating use of the death penalty for drug-related offenses specifically. But our research also shows that foreign nationals face additional barriers throughout the criminal justice process in a country that is not their own and which has an inherently opaque criminal justice system. While foreign nationals make up around 40% of Saudi Arabia's population, they account for nearly 3/4 of all executions for drug-related offenses over the past decade. And these are statistics we have gathered from January 2015 to June 2025, showing that 75% of executions for drug-related offenses were for foreign nationals. And these figures are only a part of the story. Behind them, we have documented a pattern in which many of those sentenced to death come from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, have limited education, often migrated to Saudi in search of work or better life opportunities. And in these circumstances, people's vulnerability has increased long before they enter the criminal justice system, whether through exploitation during the migration route. Some cases we documented involved trafficking or recruitment into such drug trafficking networks. Once arrested, those same vulnerabilities often make it harder to exercise their rights in trial. So during trials, many face language barriers, struggle to understand the charges against them, or the legal proceedings they are facing because they're not being provided with the documentation, their testimonies, their confessions in a language that they understand by the court. And most cannot afford private legal representation and are reliant on inconsistent interpretation or support from their consulates, while their families are hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. So the cumulative effect of these barriers we have found is profound. If you cannot understand the proceedings against you or communicate effectively with a lawyer, even a state-assigned appointed lawyer, or participate meaningfully in your own defense, the right to a fair trial is fundamentally undermined. And this is something we have documented in the vast majority of cases Amnesty has recorded in our recent reports. In such cases, the consequences are irreversible, and these safeguards can mean the difference between life and death. The title of our report last year, I quote, "If we had money and a lawyer, maybe my brother would still be alive." It is a testimony from a family member of an individual on death row, and it captures the recurring theme throughout these cases. And that is that for many foreign nationals on death row, access to justice, whether they have the resources or not, information needed, support to defend themselves, remains deeply lacking in transparency. And this is due to the structural issue and the system that Yahya and Falah and others earlier have described, and that it is an ecosystem in Saudi Arabia's criminal justice system that enables these abuses. So even if an individual eventually, and we've documented this in one case, was able to hire a private lawyer at a huge cost to the family. Families go into debt, families sell their assets or belongings to put a lawyer for their loved ones. It is often too late. So the ecosystem enabling these abuses restricts people from the very beginning to exercise and seek their rights, and that impacts foreign nationals more profoundly due to the barriers they face from the very beginning in the system. Thank you. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Dana. You started round 3 to talk about discrimination and disproportionately affected groups. And now I'm going to ask Ali, who's online with us still, to now discuss the targeting of the Shia minority and the execution or sentencing of individuals, including those who committed them as allegedly as children.
Thank you, Michael. Actually, such are document violation wherever they occur. We have monitored cases involving Shia and Sunni citizens Saudi national and foreign national, children and adult political defendants, drug-related cases, and protest-related cases. Our standard is the violation itself, not the religious or sectarian identity of the victim. There is a clear pattern of intensive use of death penalty against the Shia minority, especially in the Eastern Province. Many of these are not murder cases, as a lot of people know. They are related to protest, political expression, funerals, or fake terrorism and national security accusation. In this context, the death penalty become a tool of fear against a marginalized community. But the risk of execution child defendants is not limited to Shia children. Sunni child defendants such as Mustafa Abkar and Mish'al al-Farraj only become known after the execution happening in 2016 or throughout later discussion among activists. In some cases, we learned that the person had been child only after the state had killed him. We have also seen with strong indicators that other child defendants may have been executed, including Yemenis. Sometimes the person was very young at execution, had been arrested years earlier, or may have been charged for acts dating back to before 18. Secrecy, fear, lack of documents, and limited research capacity prevented full documentation. In Saudi Arabia, secrecy is part of execution policy. Facts often emerge only after the execution. Families are afraid to speak, files are inaccessible, and some victims disappear behind the official narrative. For protesters and political defendants, broad labels such as terrorism, disturbing security, or public order are used to turn protest chants, funerals, or alleged contact with wanted persons into capital cases. Such acts must never lead to the death penalty under international law. Saudi Arabia reform on child defendants are not real with back doors remain open. Ta'zir, terrorism, national security, and the discretion of judge and prosecutors. Saudi court are not independent safeguard. The specialized criminal court and the public prosecutor translate political will into ruling. The death penalty in Saudi Arabia is not justice. It is a policy of fear. It is used against Shia citizens, Sunni citizens, foreign nationals, child defendants, protesters, and anyone the authorities want to turn into a warning to society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. And now we're going to turn back to Yahya, who will talk about the use of the broad use of the word terrorism and national security charges, and how this affects human rights defenders, journalists, protesters, and others targeted for using the freedom of expression or association. 3 minutes.
Thank you. I will try to make it short. Before the anti-terror law in Saudi Arabia, before they have this law, we were saying for people, Saudi Arabia, they are mixing between terror act and between the freedom of speech. And some people, they thought we are not telling the truth until Saudi Arabia, they published the law itself. And they have seen several articles in the law itself. It's very clearly fighting the freedom of speech. And the special rapporteur for the Human Rights Council, she said in the report that she published that she said Saudi Arabia limited the freedom of speech in the name of fighting the terror. And she said also in her report, She believed that the authority pushing people for terror act by closing the atmosphere for the any peaceful activities. The main goal for the regime is to silence people. They want to keep the corruption, the repression, the dictatorship system while everyone silence. And to keep that atmosphere, they are executing people, torturing people, arresting people, silence everyone. Right now, there is no any human rights defenders on the ground can be active on the ground right now. They have been arrested, everyone, and people, they have been freed. They are in travel ban and they have they faced the threat for the death penalty. So yes, there is people they have been freed, but they faced the threat for death penalty, and they still worried about it. In one of the articles in the law, they said criticizing the king or the crown prince is a terror act. And in the first article, in article number 1, when they explaining what does it mean, the terror act, they said by trying to push the authority to do something, or by trying to enforce the authority from stopping any act, this is a terror act. And they don't say if you try peacefully. And for that, people, our colleagues, they tried to force the authority to allow women to drive. They have been taken to the specialized criminal court, and they have been investigated and judged by this terror law. So this mixing from the authority, that's led for huge number of executions. And I can give example for the journalist Turki Jasser. Turki Jasser, he criticized Mohammed bin Salman, he criticized the regime peacefully, and they executed him. And they are doing that just to make sure they threat everyone and to silence everyone. So they are using the law and the death penalty to silence the society, and this is what they success for, and this is what what we should, all of us, trying to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yahya. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the immediate impact on families and secrecy and the psychological suffering. And so we're just going to have a few minutes from Miriam from her brief.
Thank you. Actually, after the prisoners themselves, families are perhaps the greatest victims of Saudi Arabia's use of the death penalty. Last year, Abdullah Darazi, who had been sentenced to death for allegedly attending protests as a child, was executed in secret. Neither his family nor his lawyer were informed, and his family only learned of his execution through social media. Sadly, this isn't an isolated case. It reflects a broader pattern in Saudi Arabia where families are routinely kept in the dark about the status of their loved ones and are not informed before, even sometimes after, an execution takes place. In some cases, families have learned of an execution through a phone call from another inmate and not the authorities themselves. The mother of reprieved client Omar Sharif received no official notification of her son's death. So even after seeing reports on social media, she struggled to believe that he'd been executed, which delayed her ability to begin the grieving process. In all of these cases, families are denied the most basic human dignity of saying goodbye to their loved ones or making a final phone call. Saudi authorities also routinely refuse to return the bodies of those executed to their families, which the UN Human Rights Committee has recognized through its jurisprudence as amounting to ill treatment, inhuman and degrading treatment. None of the families of reprieved clients who were executed last year have received the remains of their loved ones or information about where they're buried. And alongside the immense psychological suffering of having a family member on death row, we've also documented cases where Saudi authorities appear to create false hope to inmates and their families. So, for example, last year, Egyptian nationals on death row for drug offenses were told by prison officials that their cases were under review and that pardons might be possible. Their families held on to that hope only for the men to be executed shortly afterwards. And we're sadly now observing that same pattern of psychological torture, essentially, in cases of Ethiopian nationals on death row for drug offenses. Around a week ago, prisoners were informed that the execution of Ethiopian nationals would be halted, only for them to resume just 2 days ago, actually. Many families, particularly those of foreign nationals, as my colleagues have described, are left without official communication or confirmation of burial sites or even death certificates. This deprives them of closure and the ability to carry out religious rites and proper burial practices. The result is that the suffering caused by the death penalty is compounded and extends far beyond the individual who is executed. The lack of transparency and basic human dignity reflects a systemic pattern that runs through every stage of death penalty cases in Saudi Arabia, from arrest, execution, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to go back to Dana online, who is going to give a perspective from Amnesty on impact on families, specifically the foreign nationals.
Thank you, Michael. And
3 minutes,
thank you,
please.
I'll be brief because Miriam already covered a lot of the aspects that impact families. It is indeed one of the most devastating aspects of the cases we work on, and that families are trying to navigate an almost completely opaque criminal justice system from another country. In practice, the lack of transparency often determines whether families are able to advocate for their loved ones, hire lawyers, seek due process rights for their loved ones who may not understand what's going on in their cases before it's too late. And due to that, and due to families being away and outside of Saudi Arabia, they cannot attend hearings, visit their relatives in detention, meet with lawyers, because a lot of the times detainees are not given even if they have a lawyer, are not given a chance or sufficient facilities and time to meet with their legal representatives. Or even advocate directly with the authorities, because as we know from other cases, sometimes you need a representative inside the country to chase around your paperwork, your court documents. And this is something that foreign nationals don't have the ability to do because their families are away. Instead, families rely on infrequent phone calls, if they're lucky, once a week or twice a month, and have very little information about the legal process. And this uncertainty, as Mariam described, has an immense emotional and psychological toll and is torturous. Therefore, transparency is a safeguard. It is not merely a demand that families are asking for to feel better about the status of their loved ones or to know about what's going on. It's a safeguard because it enables families to seek legal representation, to engage consular officials and advocate for due process lives. And that potentially could save lives in many cases where the death penalty is arbitrarily handed down without any safeguards.
Thank you very much, Dana. I'm actually going to open it up for questions right now, and then I'll leave the last word to Ali and to Yahya, and to talk a little bit about the message to states. But I want to open it up to comments and questions to see if there are anything you would like to add. If not, we can move back to the speakers. So if anybody would like to put up a hand or a flag. I'm only going to impose so many uncomfortable seconds of silence on you. I just wanted to get a sense of where we were with some questions. So what I'd like to do is pass back to Ali, please. And perhaps you can give us what you would think of the message that states should be delivering to Saudi Arabia now, having discussed all the many aspects of the death penalty in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Michael. I think we must deal with a difficult truth. Not every influential state has a genuine commitment to human rights. Human rights language is often selective. As activists, we must remain vigilant. Some states expected to act here have enabled grave violations elsewhere, including in Gaza. This exposes deep double standards. We recognize states that criticize Saudi execution, but key Saudi partners have often been part of the problem. After the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, major power normalized relation again. the United States, France, and later Germany and the United Kingdom give political comfort instead of serious consequences. So the message should not only be Saudi Arabia must reform, influential state must also stop rewarding the Saudi leadership while it expands execution and repression. For Saudi Arabia, the minimum demand are an immediate moratorium commutation of unlawful death sentences, an end to execution and drug protest, political and child defendants cases, and review of torture, coerced conventions, denial of lawyers, and unfair trial, but not by the same non-independent judiciary. Saudi Arabia does not need cosmetic improvement to its execution system. It needs to stop the political and judicial killing carried out under the cover of law. Silence and support are not neutrality. They help this bloody policy continue. And I would like to end my intervention that, to be honest with those NGOs and those friends, I lose the trust in a lot of political like intervention with Saudi execution, human rights violation. I trust by Yahya, Mariam, Michael, Falah, and Dana more than any state. They are supporting the violation of Saudi Arabia. That's why I think we need to consideration about this question again, the role of a state under United Nations and the relation between them and the violation in Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that summary, Ali. I think you covered quite a lot, but I think Yahya, you will also have some points to add.
Okay, thank you. One of the main issues right now that Saudi Arabia, they are controlling the narrative, not just inside the country, but even outside the country. How they control the narrative outside the country, they can pay millions for the media to celebrate one changing in the law. And when we are talking about this change, it's cosmetic, it is not real, it is not deep. They are writing 2 pages report, and they are saying at the end of the report, but NGOs say this is cosmetic reform, and they are saying they are balanced. And this is what people have seen in the media, what people have seen everywhere. So they success with PR, and this is the most success for the authority. So what I am asking people to see is to see the report from the independent bodies, whether in the Human Rights Council, NGOs, or from the Saudi activists, or to see the reality on the ground. For example, look at the death penalty. With all the promises from Saudi Arabia, last year it was they broke the record, and the year before they broke the record, but they keep increasing the numbers from time to time. So this number of executions, yes, we always have repression in Saudi Arabia, but it's keep increasing from time to time. If you look to the ground, the execution keep increased, and the silence for people keep increased. The transparency, there's nothing. The accountability is zero. And as Ali mentioned, even with the case like the case for Jamal Khashoggi, we thought there will be a real accountability about it. This is what we see in reality. But what you can see in the media, everyone asking us about the reform. And when we are meet with the officials everywhere, they are saying, yeah, we understand, but is there a reform? Is there some progress? We can't trust Mohammed bin Salman trying to do something. And they keep believing something like Mohammed bin Salman when he have been asked by the media about some cases, like he have been asked about Al-Ghamidi, he was in the death row, and he said, yeah, I'm ashamed about that, and this is disaster, I don't like it, but this is from the judge, it's nothing from me. And everyone knows this is not true. And also before that, he have said something similar about different case when they arrested the women rights defenders. He have been asked about them, and he said nothing to do with me. And he said they have been taking large amount of bribes from foreigners outside the country. And okay, they said that. So
last sentence? Or?
Last sentence, yeah. So Mohammed bin Salman himself saying things for the media, and you can just verify this while he's talking, not just after the interview, and which is not true. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you, Yahya, but I see the EU have a question. So please.
Organizers and all the panelists for their valuable contributions. As you know, the European Union has the death penalty as one of its long-standing priorities. And we do point out the countries that have the highest numbers of executions, including China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Yemen, but also Belarus. That is the only country in Europe, actually, that retains the death penalty. And we did express concern over the serious increase in executions in Saudi Arabia, including executions for drug-related offenses. So, as you know, we strongly oppose that penalty at all times and in all circumstances. There will be, and we are looking forward to the World Congress on against the death penalty that will take place in Paris next week. So hopefully that will also be an opportunity for us to discuss this further. But for now, I was just wondering, how do you see the role of the Council in taking some of these issues that were mentioned, especially for those that were children at the time of, as you mentioned, participating in protests and then being and then the capital punishment being followed through. So thank you very much.
Yahya, I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer that question. We have to leave in 2 or 3 minutes, so I'll just use this to say thank you very much for coming. And when we close, maybe we can move outside to continue the discussion for the next group. Yahya, 1 minute for you. The question was, what can the Council do? What can the Council do?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Just keep following on the contact with the NGOs, which is already great, but we need to keep it ongoing and to keep the pressure, especially with the people dealing with the authority and trying to cover the violations and to try to enhance the authority, and also with the countries they have people in the death row. Thank you. Thank you very much.
30 seconds for Fala, and then we will close the...
Yes, I just wanted to add maybe just one thing. I know that many states here, including the EU, have bilateral dialogues regularly with Saudi Arabia. It's really important to actually bring up the UN's findings in these bilateral dialogues, bring out the WIGAD opinions where they found that there is a violations of international law, bring up the findings of the treaty body committees. Saudi Arabia is being reviewed by the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination and the CEDAW. So feel free to, check these findings and bring them up in their bilateral dialogues. This is really important to show the Saudi government that there is continuous international scrutiny on them.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to our speakers online as well, Dana and Ali, and to the invisible person, the technician who helped make all that happen. Thank you all for coming.